So let me ask you this question. We're going to be studying and reading together the Sabbath by Abraham Joshua Heschel. It looks really, really thin, but it is very thick with meaning. And hopefully we will draw out much of that meaning. So, when I say Shabbat, say to yourself, what's the word that comes up for you? So let's look at reading number 1. And I'm going to ask you to think about what strikes you as a different way of experiencing or understanding Shabbat as Abraham Joshua Heschel speaks of it. The meaning of the Sabbath is to celebrate time rather than space. Because 6 days a week we live under the tyranny of things of space. On the Sabbath we try to become attuned to holiness in time. It is a day on which we are called upon to share in what is eternal in time, to turn from the results of creation to the mystery of creation, from the world of creation to the creation of the world. So I'm going to invite you to turn to someone you're seated near and just to answer that question. What strikes you from these very full, meaningful words of what Abraham Joshua Heschel speaks about when he describes an understanding of Shabbat? So turn to somebody, smile, say hi, Shabbat Shalom, and just share that piece of information. So I've heard a couple of comments about the power of ritual, how space, there's the tyranny of space. There's a lot more that we could be looking at, and we will continue. So let me tell you that this particular book begins through the eyes of a child. That child is a very grown and accomplished adult, the Jewish scholar and college professor, Susanna Heschel, Heschel's daughter. Like us all, we are the child of our parent, no matter our age. She observed, both as witness and participant, the meaning of making Shabbat, of turning from the world of creation to the creation of the world, in all its awesome beauty. Her introduction to our congregational read, The Sabbath, written by her father, is like an intention, a kavanah of how it is possible to enter into Shabbat. Written only 11 years after Heschel arrived as a German refugee, rescued, by the way, by the Reform movement, his mastery of English allowed him to use the poetic tone to evoke the mood of Shabbat he described, writes Susanna. How true. As we can see and will study, Heschel did not compose a how-to. There are no how to do Shabbat, what customs you should do, how to do the ceremonies. It all took a back seat while entering into Shabbat was, quote, a complement to building civilization, not retreating from it. He sought to articulate what it means to, quote, live with people and remain free, as well as to live with things and remain independent. Sanctification depends on our behavior and attitude. Heschel understood that holy exists and is up to us to recognize it, and if we don't, it's actually still there. This is where the divine presence dwells as well. Now, the way that I understand this metaphor is something I learned from a colleague, Rabbi David Stern. And he asked, does your birthday still commemorate the day of your birth if you do nothing, like no cake or presents? Does it? I'm glad you're saying yes. Shabbat occurs whether or not we recognize it. It's there. Therefore, human actions allow the Sabbath to be enjoyed and savored. For Heschel, we can enter into time just as we can enter into a building, and there'll be more on that next week. But let's look at text number 2. So, And this might be the only place where there's a bit of a how-to. And I'm just going to read them because I'm not sure if everyone online had them, so I'm going to read it. There are some helpful Sabbath laws, those that require shutting off of secular demands and refraining from work. In enumerating the categories that constitute work, the Mishnah describes types of activities necessary to build technological civilization. He knew nothing of an iPhone and yet understood the power of technology. And then she says, yet my father goes further. Not only is it forbidden to light a fire on the Sabbath, but he writes, you shall kindle no fire, not even the fire of righteous indignation. And let's think about all those conversations where righteous indignation is just burning the house down. So she recognized that in her house, certain topics actually were avoided. Politics, the Holocaust from which he was saved, the war in Vietnam in which he was quite vocal, while others were emphasized. So observing the Sabbath is not only about refraining from work, but about creating menucha, a restfulness that is also a celebration. As she says, the Sabbath is a day for body as well as soul. It is a sin to be sad on the Sabbath, a lesson my father often repeated and always observed. He wondered, what could it mean to bring paradise here on earth? He saw that it was the Sabbath. He understood that. And so in the introduction, Susanna Heschel recognizes a moment of paradise even in the saddest moment. And I'm going to invite us to look to text number 4. On my father's last Shabbat, we had a wonderful dinner with many friends, after which one of our guests read aloud some of my father's Yiddish poems, written when he was a young man. He went to sleep that night and never woke. In Jewish tradition, dying in one's sleep is called a kiss of God. And dying on the Sabbath is a gift that is merited by piety. For the pious person, my father once wrote, it is a privilege to die. He understood something about the Sabbath that we are trying to grasp as we make our way through this book. So now some of his words. And let me just say, it seems to me that Heschel was prescient in his foresight about technical civilization. He knew nothing of iPhones, of social media, AI, or computers. But it didn't matter because the mechanisms of our world have attached us to things. How many people have felt you have too many things in your home? I'm not sure there's anyone who doesn't. I certainly do. We have a lot of things. He felt this, as I would like to say, these things as an irritant to his soul. But I actually don't think this is exactly true, because Heschel knew that we needed the technical, but also needed the refueling to nourish our souls to act in the world. As he said, to have more does not mean to be more. It's like the Russian folk story that asks how much land does a person need, and the answer is a bit macabre because the answer is the size of a grave. As Heschel notes, life goes wrong when the control of space, the acquisition of things of space, becomes our sole concern. Selling ourselves into servitude to things, we become a utensil that is broken at the fountain of profit. For Heschel, God is not of space. Even religions are frequently dominated by the notion that deity resides in space, not as the spirit. So I would like to invite us to look at text 5, to read it to yourself, and then again to turn to somebody next to you to see about this idea about space and deity. What does that mean? What are we worshiping? What do others worship? Okay, I'm going to call back to your attention, and here's my favorite part. So we're creating this idea of time being so beautiful, and we're going to learn about entering into time and recognizing space and things and all the ways that we get distracted from being in time. But one of the things that Heschel establishes in his introduction is that he says that we can turn time into a monster. And I love this idea how we turn time into a monster. Because what is it that we often find ourselves saying about time? I don't have any time, right? Time, it just takes me so much time, or I don't have enough time. And so all of a sudden, it's time's fault. That's what Heschel's saying. It's time's fault. So how do we think differently about time? And Bob and Jean, you helped us think different about time, because it's when we can enter into a sacred moment that we begin to experience time so differently. I'm wondering if anyone has experienced that kind of time so differently. Maybe in the birth of a child. Thank you for exhibit number 1, okay? Maybe it is walking down the aisle. Maybe it is saying goodbye the moment that someone we love breathes their last breath. Time becomes so different. And he teaches that the festivals were transformed from agricultural experiences actually to sacred moments of time. What does Passover signify? Do I hear the Exodus from Egypt? Yeah, that's a moment in time. How about Shavuot? Giving of the Torah. And how about Sukkot? Harvest, that's the nature thing. But what was Sukkot? Wandering in the desert. They came to every single festival service from before they could talk. So these moments of time that we experience makes us feel differently about time. And so this is the way I'd like to invite us to bring this part, which is the prologue and the intro, to a conclusion, is to look at the last text, which was the first text, to read it to yourself, to breathe it in, to think about and consider where's the meaning that you're going to make from these ideas about Shabbat. And may it be a one of peace. Take a few moments just to take in these words again.